Hi, I'm Tom Freyberg here for the IDA World Congress in Sydney, Australia, and pleased to be joined by Professor John Leinhard from MIT in the US. Professor, good to see you, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
So you delivered one of the keynote moonshot presentations, really to sort of get everyone thinking around the themes of innovation.
Yes.
And it was all around atomic-powered desalination. Hugely, interesting, engaging, potentially divisive topic, but actually you spoke about the need and the possibility of decentralized atomic-powered desalination plants on the coast.
Correct.
Can you give us a kind of summary of this concept potential of nuclear desal?
Well, very briefly, nuclear power produces energy without putting any carbon into the atmosphere. And as we're looking at a climate crisis where fossil fuels are driving climate change, alternatives like nuclear power deserve really full consideration for their potential to help us minimize the amount of carbon we continue to add to the atmosphere. The notion is really pretty simple. If we have desalination plants, if we want one near the shore, if we power it with nuclear energy, then we are producing water without carbon. And that's really the key goal here. Can we do water without carbon? For classical nuclear technology, you're talking about fission power. It's a case where you split heavy, unstable atoms, typically uranium, into lighter elements. And when that happens, a lot of energy is released. The lighter isotopes are quite diverse, but unfortunately some of them are long-lived radioactive elements that produce long-lasting nuclear waste. Nevertheless, that waste is contained. It is not shot up into the sky. It's not causing global warming. But there are new desalination, new nuclear technologies coming down the pike, fusion energy being one in particular. And in fusion, instead of breaking atoms apart, you're merging them. And so you take very light atoms, hydrogen isotopes, and crash them into each other at high energy, and you form helium, and when that happens, enormous amounts of energy are released. And it doesn't produce radioactive waste. So my idea was that if we get fusion working, we can use fusion electricity to have clean water without carbon and without any nuclear waste. So it seems to capture a number of good benefits. Now, I don't know how much you've followed fusion technology over the years, Tom, but people have been working on it literally since the 1950s. It's been difficult because you have to heat those hydrogen atoms up to a temperature like that in the interior of the sun. And that's millions of degrees Kelvin. And to do that, you have something that's called a plasma. Everything's ionized, and plasmas are confined by magnetic fields. And the challenge has always been, can I hold this plasma in the field without it popping its way out somewhere? And so stabilizing the plasma has been a big challenge. But what's changed recently is we now have high-temperature superconductors. High temperature for a superconductor. Well, let me start. What's a superconductor? A superconductor conducts electricity without resistance. If you run a lot of electricity in a loop, you produce a magnetic field inside the loop. If you do it with a superconductor, you've got no electrical resistance, so you can generate high currents and very high magnetic fields. The advantage of the high-temperature conductor is you can do this at the relatively high temperature of liquid nitrogen rather than liquid helium, which is much colder. So this technology has been proven at MIT. They've shown that they can make these magnets, that they can hold plasma. They will be burning plasma with this technology in a couple of years, meaning producing net energy by fusing hydrogen and helium. They expect to have commercial power on the grid by the early 2030s. Now that's a lot sooner than fusion has ever been. Most of my life, for the past 30 years at least, fusion technology has been 30 years into the future. And the timeline's getting shorter, and projections are becoming very realistic. So I'm excited. I am really optimistic that we might be able to have energy and water without waste products.
Well, I love the way you explain it, and as you mentioned, this has been worked on for several decades, but actually we're almost just at that tipping point, around the corner, early 30s. And I think one of the linking it back to desalination is often when you're talking about coupling with renewable energy,
Yes.
the type of power you need to power a substantially sized desalination plant. Give us a comparison in terms of the footprint. And you mentioned the Diablo Canyon plant, but actually
Right.
you're talking acres of fields of PV plants to kind of get
I'll give you a very direct comparison.
Yeah.
The nuclear plant at Diablo Canyon on the coast of California in the USA produces 2.2 gigawatts of electric power steadily, so-called baseload power. To do that with solar panels would require that you set aside an area the size of the San Francisco Peninsula and cover it with solar panels. The entire city of San Francisco and beyond would be underneath silicon if you did that. And so the land area trade-offs really do matter. But there's another thing. You don't get any power from the solar panels when the sun sets. And so you need a storage solution. Generally, that's considered to be batteries, some sort of an array of batteries. A lot of work being done on that. Some of my close colleagues are very active in finding better, more economical batteries. But when you do this with fusion, it's baseload, steady power. It's not intermittent. You get power when the sun's not shining or when the wind's not blowing, and you don't need batteries to make things run.
Professor, this is hugely exciting. And so give us some numbers, because you mentioned early 30s, so when potentially commercial exporting to the grid, in terms of coupling it to the desalination process. We've talked before about to retrofit sort of 30 to 40 plants that you've scoped out already?
So the existing fission plants, there are on the order of 30 plants near the coast around the world, cooled with seawater already pulling water from the ocean. That water could directly go to reverse osmosis for desalination and provide clean water with clean energy immediately if there were interest to do that. And the 30 I mentioned are the 30 that are in water-stressed areas. And when I say retrofit, it's very important to understand that we are not talking about changing the turbines in the plant. We're not going to pull steam out of the plant and extract it and run other processes. We're just taking the electrical power that the plant generates and the water that's already leaving the steam condensers in the power plant.
Hugely exciting, and I think this is certainly, you definitely got the attention of the attendees here in Sydney with a moonshot, but I think sometimes a very achievable moonshot from how you're describing it. So wishing you and the colleagues the best of luck for the continued development into this MIT, and appreciate your time. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Tom. Very much appreciate it.